that have killed over 560,000 Americans and close to 8,000 people from Connecticut. We do this with our eyes wide open. We are making changes that we know will affect families, but our primary responsibility is to protect the public health. And we're very confident that's what we're doing here. That's it for me.
Thanks, Jonathan. And you'll have plenty of time to talk today, I'm sure. So save that voice. And we'll take any questions you got, Larry.
Okay, let's open up with Paul Hughes from the Waterbury Republican.
Morning, Paul.
Good morning. So you told us in the past that you'd bring this out, whether or not you had the votes to pass it or not. Do you have the votes to pass this bill as amended?
Yes. Yep.
What's the margin?
Be pretty overwhelming, Paul.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about, there was some question raised in the Appropriations Committee concerning the accuracy of the fiscal note and some concerns about children who are not fully up to date on their immunizations. Any responses, any explanations regarding that?
I'll let Jonathan take the second one, Paul. In terms of the fiscal note, I mean, look, we rely on OFA. Sometimes we don't like the fiscal note or might disagree with it. And at the end of the day, they are the nonpartisan independent fiscal analysts for the state of Connecticut. I have great faith in their office. Even when I don't always necessarily love the number they give us, we have great faith. Someone mentioned lawsuits. You know, that's the Attorney General's office. There will be a lawsuit. They'll defend it as they do many other constitutional challenges to statutes that we pass. So again, I trust OFA in their numbers. Jonathan, you want to answer the second question?
Well, yeah, I don't serve on the Appropriations Committee, but what I understand is that the amendment that was offered was based on highly arguable assumptions about the number of people who would actually be affected. It takes the extreme position. My understanding, and to some degree, we're all making assumptions, is the number of affected students in the state of Connecticut, particularly if we grandfather down to kindergarten, will be much, much lower than they were trying to purport in the context of appropriations. So I found that particular approach not particularly helpful for people understanding what this is really about.
Yeah, or typical, Paul, someone mentioned there'd be 30,000 lawsuits. You know, it's nonsensical, right? There'll be a class action lawsuit, right? There'll be one plaintiff who will represent the others, and the Attorney General will defend it. There'll be no cost to the state for that.
Okay, Christine from the News Junkie.
Thanks, guys. So I just wanted to know, how many children would be impacted by this, or we don't know?
I think the answer is we don't know. I think a lot of people were basing it off of the experience in New York State, which is a much bigger state and with different demographic profiles. We know that a percentage of people will not send their kids to school after they're no longer eligible. Estimates could be as low as 1,000 or higher than that. My estimate, based upon the assumptions I've made, looking at the data, suggests it will be on the lower end, certainly nowhere near the 8,500 that have been bandied about by those who want to paint the most bleak picture of what the impact is.
And I want to give you an opportunity to, what will be the requirements for the schools being able to report? And I think that there's some misinformation out there regarding what vaccines are covered by the CDC schedule.
Well, there really shouldn't be any confusion about what vaccines are covered by the CDC schedule. They did the same they did for a long time. And DPH is the one that administers those decisions, obviously with appropriate oversight. We're not changing anything, and it should be clear to everybody that we're not talking about COVID, which has not been approved for children yet, and who knows if it ever will be. So it's very easy to muddy the waters, if you will, but the statute is very clear on what is covered, and DPH has final authority as to what might be added to it.
Yeah. And just to add to that, you know, if you had additional vaccines down the road added, for example, the commissioner can base it upon the CDC recommendation, but it's got to go through the regulation review process, which is bipartisan. It's equal number of Republican and Democrats, which is why that committee was comprised that way. Right now, it's chaired by a Republican in the House, for example. So the commissioner needs to go through reg review to do that and get votes from both sides of the aisle to add to the schedule. And you could also put bills in if you didn't like it to change it. The second thing about the reporting, Christine, you know, I don't really think that the DPH reporting will be as relevant going forward, because what you'll see beginning next year is no religious exemptions. So medical has maintained, you'll see medical report, but you will no longer have a report on religious because they don't exist. So I guess it's relevant, but it will change the nature of the report.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris Keating, Hartford Courant.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. Mr. Speaker and Representative Steinberg, can you take me through, for lack of a better term, the compromise? In other words, going from 7th grade to kindergarten, that picks up quite a few children, and I assume it picks up quite a few votes in your caucus. So take me through that. That had been mentioned before, but obviously it's going to be happening now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it picked up a lot of votes from our caucus. I mean, I will tell you that if the amendment does not pass today, it will be 7th grade, and that will be, and the Senate will pass the same thing. So it's a question of that there will be, for a lot of our members, they wanted the opportunity to vote for that amendment, but if it were to fail and the kindergarten amendment not pass, then it would be 7th grade, and there will be the votes to do that. There are a handful of people who that was the deciding factor, but for many, they just wanted the opportunity to vote for it. And then if it didn't pass, they would be fine voting for the underlying bill because they tried to advocate for that change. But it looks like it will pass. So we'll move forward with that going forward. But in terms of, you know, what that means and what that impact is in the compromises, you know, we played it straight and we vote counted people. And I think the other side did the same thing. And this was a consensus reached by a good number of people on both sides to bring it down. And, you know, I can't preach bipartisanship or in cooperation to chairs about their bills and then, you know, have an opportunity, yes, as the leader of the Democratic caucus, but also of a chamber, to not listen to that. And so when you have enough people telling you on both sides that that's the preference, you can't ignore that vote count. You can't ignore that desire. It was pretty, you know, when you add the two numbers together, it's pretty large. And I want to be a consistent person in how I approach these things. So do I have disappointed people in our caucus that it's not going to be 7th grade? I do, a lot, dozens of people, probably more. Probably half the caucus is disappointed in that regard, Chris. And so last night wasn't the easiest caucus to ever have. But this is what happens in the Capitol. There is compromises that have to be made to move things forward. That's what we'll do.
And can you tell me anything about the Senate? I know you don't speak for the Senate, but
I certainly do not.
Well, can we assume that you would not be going forward today if you thought it was going to be blocked in the Senate?
Look, I'll just say this. I value my relationship with the Senate president a great deal. We speak often, so I'll let him speak for his caucus, but we're in pretty good communication pretty regularly.
Okay.
Ken Dixon from Hearst.
I'm getting there. Hang on. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
We can hear you, Ken.
Thanks. Okay, so you just said there aren't going to be religious exemptions, but you're going to have a whole generation of K through 12 kids who are still citing the religious exemption, right?
Yes, I didn't mean that. I meant going forward. So remember, vaccines are done in kindergarten and 7th grade. That's the numbers that get reported. So what I was trying to say to Christine is, for the kindergarten class of 22, for example, you won't see it anymore because it won't exist. But you're correct; it will exist for the existing students. Yeah.
Okay,
sorry if I
thanks.
confused that. Yeah.
No, you didn't confuse it. I confused it. So Representative Steinberg, is this going to be a friendly amendment then when you're on the floor?
I will say that there is a rationale for why we chose 7th grade and above. If you look at the data from DPH, it's been the youngest cohorts, the kindergarten incoming classes, and as they move through the system, that have been most problematic. So the thought was that we would not offer grandfathering for those students so as to try to nip the problem in the bud before it became an emergency. That's good public health policy, is to be proactive. So that if we are to grandfather them, we are to some degree postponing the direct addressing of the problem as we see it. So there's a measure of risk in bringing it down to kindergarten.
Well, and that leads me to my follow-up is, I mean, I don't like the term herd immunity as much as community immunity, but I mean, how long is it going to take to get some across the board community immunity then?
Well, you know, there's another aspect to this bill that I think we need to continue to emphasize, which is the prospect of a pathway to a medical exemption. And I think it's really more about the dialogue between practitioners and families that are intended, and we've added a clause offering insurance reimbursement for an extended consultation between practitioners and families. We want to reestablish rapport. We want to have that conversation. I'm highly confident that after that takes place, a lot of the people who might call themselves vaccine concerned will have their children vaccinated, and that will have an impact on the overall number, and hopefully begin to address the problem before it gets more serious.
Thank you.
Okay, Jody Latina from Channel 8. It looks like iPhone.
Hi there. Good morning. Thank you. I'm wondering, so September 2022 is when this would go in effect. Will there be remote learning offered to the kids who might choose not to be vaccinated? How will they be schooled?
So it's a good question. There's no obligation of the state to educate people who are not enrolled. And so if you don't comply with if you don't have a medical exemption and you have not complied with the state statute that is required of vaccinations, you're not enrolled. So I know there'll be a lawsuit, and unless the courts overturn 100 years of precedent, some will make the argument today that the Connecticut Constitution requires an education. It does if you're enrolled. If you don't follow the other statutes regarding public health, though, that will override the state constitution provision. And that's been the ruling of both the state and U.S. Supreme Court for a long time. Again, other states have this provision. They don't have to educate children. They're allowed to make decisions about public health. Public health does trump that, and that goes back to 1906. However, having said that, Jody, there are people, and this is not Jonathan's domain, in the Education Committee who are working on that. Bobby Sanchez will talk about that today. Representative McCarty, the ranking member, I believe will talk about it. COVID did show us that although it's not the same to learn online, there are some merits to it. The governor was quoted in an article last week with the superintendent, I think, of Manchester, that it could help supplement education. Forget vaccinations. There are kids who can't go to school sometimes on snow days. There are kids who have to work. And so maybe having a different schedule once a week would be helpful. So I look at remote learning as another bill that indirectly addresses this potentially for some kids and gives them an option. And I'm okay with that. But I think it addresses more than just the issue of vaccines. It addresses a lot of kids. You could have a serious injury or a serious illness and not be able to go to school for a couple of weeks. And now you can go online and learn. So we're not required to do anything, but if we can give people more options, more kids from different groups, I'm okay with that, absolutely.
Susan Haigh, Associated Press.
Thanks, Larry. Good morning, everyone. Considering that this won't take effect until September 2022, do you expect there will be a rush for people to try to get these religious exemptions? And I have a dumb question. Once you get the exemption, are you set for life? Or do they have to come back and
Jonathan,
get one?
can you explain the difference between effective upon passage versus the September 22 thing?
Certainly. Any individual who hopes to be able to leverage the religious exemption would need to have it in place prior to the date of passage, meaning that when the governor signs the bill, that's effectively the date in which that is operative. The September 2022 date reflects the need to be in compliance in order to be eligible for school, so that they'll have opportunity to meet with their pediatricians or other practitioners and arrive at a means by which to catch up, which may be conceivably agreed upon as a staggered schedule of some sort, but that they will need to be in compliance by September 2022 or have a schedule on record signed by the practitioner indicating when they will be in compliance.
So Sue, I don't see a rush because you're not going to be able to once the governor signs the bill. And again, you have to be enrolled in a school to get it, and in kindergarten now. But I think there probably was a rush in the last couple of years since we've been debating the bill. I think that's why you see the numbers higher. I do believe that.
And once you have it, are you good to go for the rest of your school career?
Jonathan, I believe the answer is yes.
Implicitly, transferability is assumed that basically it carries you through your academic career.
And do you know, Representative, how many states now will still have a religious exemption after this passes, if it should it pass?
44.
44 will still have one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Great, thank you very much.
It's California, New York, West Virginia, Mississippi, and Maine. And Maine's was done by constitutional amendment. The voters did it. The other states was done by the legislature.
Okay, great, thanks so much.
Looks like we have a follow-up from Jody from Channel 8 again.
Hi, thanks for unmuting me. I appreciate that. In the bill, it looks as though towns would have to pay for families who can't afford vaccinations. Is that correct? And do you know where that money would come from?
Yes, and they do it now, Jody. It's not new law. And the amount of money would be added to a municipal budget, I don't know, a couple $100 probably.
Okay, that was a quick answer there. I'm looking, I don't see any more hands raised. If anyone has a follow-up, here's your last chance. And Keating from the Current, one more time. Chris Keating.
Yes, if you can hear me. Thank you, Larry. Just to clarify what the speaker just said, I just was not completely clear on the 44 states that you mentioned. Did I hear you correctly that 44 states do have religious exemptions? I just was not clear.
Right now, 45, because Connecticut does too. So yes, there are only 5 states in the country that have gotten rid of religious exemptions. But I can't tell you what those states do, how strict they are. I have no idea.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
Okay, looks like we're clear. So thank you to Chairman Steinberg and Speaker Ritter and everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.